Carols drifted from car windows as they passed on the street, light and festive. But inside my little apartment, my world was starting to come apart, quietly, all at once, with just one phone call. I just stepped through the door of my place near Capitol Hill, dead on my feet after another grueling double shift at the community clinic. My hands were stiff from the cold, and I was still breathing fog into the air like a chimney. I kicked off my boots, stripped off my scrubs, and spotted the suitcase by the door, packed and ready. There was a folded pine-colored scarf on top, and a few gifts wrapped with care sitting next to it, lined up like little promises. Each one had been picked out with intention, like always. I'd even remembered to buy the nutmeg. And I'd tracked down that exact toffee my aunt always insists on. I'd done everything the way I was supposed to. I was hoping, once again, that maybe that would be enough. Then my phone buzzed. James's name flashed on the screen, my brother. I answered automatically, smiling before I even heard his voice. "Hey, Jules." But there was something off. His voice was too careful, like he was handling glass. "Hey, Jennifer. So, just a heads up, Sarah's coming to Christmas this year." I paused. Sarah, his new girlfriend. The one who burned sage in the living room after I told her I work in end-of-life care. "She's real into energy and emotional balance," he went on. "And, well, your job, it just brings a heavy vibe, you know? So we were thinking, maybe this year, you could just sit it out. No hard feelings." I stared at the little lights on my bargain store Christmas tree. They seemed to dim right then. "No hard feelings," he'd said. Like that somehow softened it. Before I could even gather a reply, my mom's number popped up. Her voice was sweet, but with a hard edge wrapped around it like a bow made of wire. "Sweetheart, you know we love you. But we're really hoping for a peaceful holiday this year. Sarah's delicate. If you come, things might get uncomfortable. Honestly, if you show up, we might not even open the door. No half-truths. No gentle sidestepping. Just rejection, clean and sharp." I didn't argue. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. I just stood there, still holding the phone, staring at the gifts I'd wrapped with quiet hope for a family that never really had room for me. A family that only seemed to notice I existed when I disrupted their peace. And this time, I didn't fill the silence. I let it sit in the room with me, thick and real. I moved slow, like someone cleaning up after a party they were never really invited to. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The automatic payment I'd been making toward my parents' unpaid property taxes, gone. The silent monthly deposits into James's business account, cut off. The car insurance I'd co-signed for Dad, canceled. I wasn't mad. I was done. I used to think that if I just kept giving my time, my money, my patience, they'd finally see me. I thought if I stayed helpful, stayed present, showed up with casseroles and calm words, I'd earn more than just a spot at the table. I'd earn love. I'd earn belonging. But in that quiet apartment, with the smell of cinnamon still lingering and the radiator clanking like an old heartbeat, I finally saw it clearly. I was never celebrated. I was tolerated. And now, not even that. Outside, the first snow started to fall, soft and soundless, covering the world in a kind of hush. I stood at the window, watching it all disappear under white, and what I felt wasn't sadness, it was relief. No more chasing a seat at a table I was never welcome at. No more lowering my voice, shrinking myself, hoping to be picked. This year, I wasn't going to be the outsider with my face against the glass. I wasn't going to be their backup plan, their fixer, their reminder of responsibility. For years, I thought this was just how families worked. Some kids got warmth and praise, while others had to earn affection by being useful. I was the oldest. The rough draft. The test run, as Dad liked to call me. James came along 5 years later, the golden boy. He was charm in human form. When he skipped rent to chase his latest music project, they called it chasing his dream. When I picked up an extra shift to cover bills, I was told I was pushing too hard. I remembered when he spray-painted the garage wall at 15, abstract swirls in bold colors. My parents called it expressive. They chuckled. 2 days later, I dropped a casserole dish and got a lecture about responsibility. When I filled out my FAFSA and left it on the kitchen counter for Mom, highlighted where she needed to sign, she never mentioned it again. When I got accepted into med school, I brought the letter home like it was a gold medal. She glanced at it and said, "That's a lot. Just don't lose yourself," then went back to cooking. But when James dropped out of college again to start some kind of spiritual podcast, they threw him a dinner party. Wine, candles, balloons. There's still a picture of him holding a paintbrush hanging in the hallway like he painted the Sistine Chapel. That house never once hosted a graduation party for me. One time, I found an old sketchbook of mine there, full of drawings I'd done during hospital breaks. Little moments I wanted to remember. Patients' hands. City sunsets. It was buried in the recycling bin under expired coupons and takeout menus. When I asked about it, they just shrugged and said they thought it was junk. Maybe to them it was. Maybe I was too. Still, I kept showing up. Through med school. Through residency. Through the long nights in quiet hospital rooms most people avoided. I picked geriatrics for a reason. I saw myself in those patients, the ones who gave everything, only to be forgotten when they weren't needed anymore. And at home, I stayed in character. The quiet one. The helper. The one who kept everything from falling apart. When the roof caved in and the insurance didn't pay, I covered it. When James's work dried up, I sent him money, no questions asked. When Mom's hip gave out again and her therapist stopped coming, I made the calls. I handled it because I loved them. Or maybe because I thought love meant sacrifice. They never thanked me. Didn't have to. In their world, love was an assumption. Like gravity. Like daylight. Something you don't say out loud. Something you don't have to earn unless you're me. And every time I handed them another piece of myself, they took it. Not to hurt me. Just because it never occurred to them not to. For the longest time, I thought that's just what family was, being the one holding it all together, even if no one really saw you. Like scaffolding. You're essential, but never the point. You're there to support, not to shine. But something broke in me that night. After the phone calls, after being told I wasn't welcome at Christmas, because I brought too much emotional energy. That was the line. That was when it clicked. Scaffolding isn't supposed to bleed for the building it props up. I was done making myself smaller so they could stay comfortable. And hey, if any of this hits a nerve with you, even just a little, hang around. There's more. And the next part? That's when things actually start to shift. Like when James, my brother, spent too much on some fancy vintage camera lenses for his latest documentary passion project and couldn't afford to fly home for Thanksgiving. I bought his ticket again. At the gate, he hugged me like I'd hung the moon. "You're the best sister in the universe," he said. By Monday, it was like it never happened. Another favor, quietly folded into that invisible, never-ending tab I wasn't supposed to talk about. I never waited for them to ask. I just handled it. Like some ghostly engineer in the background, keeping everything running. No spotlight, no applause, just patching leaks and smoothing out the rough parts, silently, invisibly. They never thanked me. Maybe because saying thank you would mean acknowledging that I was doing something they relied on. And once you do that, it's harder to keep asking without guilt. I told myself it was better this way. That staying invisible kept me safe. Gratitude makes people look too closely. And when you're seen, you can be judged or worse, abandoned. So I disappeared behind the drywall of their comfort. Just a quiet beam, always holding, never breaking. Until I couldn't anymore. There were nights, after back-to-back 12-hour shifts at the hospital, when I'd just sit by the window with a cup of peppermint tea, staring out at the city. Wondering what it would feel like to be seen. Not for what I could fix or fund or hold together. Just seen. As me. As Jennifer. But that kind of dreaming felt indulgent. And in our family, dreams were for people like James, people with guitars and ideas and sketchbooks. Not for girls with heating bills and spreadsheets. So I kept showing up. Year after year. I brought the bread pudding to Christmas, the one they always loved. And every time someone asked, "Wait, who made this?" I just smiled, like it had shown up on its own, carried in on holiday cheer. When James's rent was short, I wired him money. Quietly. When my parents called, completely baffled by their W-2s, I sat on the phone until past midnight, walking them through every box and line, while my own stack of untouched tax forms waited on the kitchen counter. I told myself that love looked like this, being reliable, being useful, holding it all up. And that one day, if I just kept doing that, someone would finally notice the weight I'd been carrying. But standing there in my tiny kitchen, the phone still warm from being told I was too much, something in me shifted. I saw it for what it really was. They weren't going to see me. Not because they didn't love me, but because I'd never given them a reason to. I'd trained them to rely on me, not to appreciate me. I made myself invisible. And they just adjusted to that shape. So that night, with the smell of cinnamon still clinging to the air and the snow starting to fall soft and slow beyond the glass, I picked up my phone. Not to reach out. Not to argue. I opened my banking app. And I started unplugging things. The $8,000 I'd been sending every month to keep their mortgage from falling behind? Stopped. Emergency savings? Locked. No more surprise roof repairs. No more late-night bailouts. Next time James's car wouldn't start in the dead of winter, he could figure it out himself. It felt mechanical at first, just a few taps. Cancel autopay. Disable joint access. End authorizations. Routine stuff, like paying a bill or brushing my teeth. But each click brought this stillness I hadn't felt in years. Not numb. Not bitter. Free. It was like something inside me stretched, something with feathers. Like a bird realizing the cage door had been open this whole time. I pulled out a notebook and made a list. Not to shame myself, just to lay it all out. All the times I'd quietly paid for problems that weren't mine. The flights. The surgeries, the overdraft fees, the flat tires and hospital bills and bounce checks. Dozens of fires I'd put out behind the scenes. The ink started to blur not because I was crying, but because the truth of my own exhaustion was finally being seen. By me. And no, I wasn't mad. People would try to say I was, eventually. They always do when the support beams walk away. Jennifer's so cold now. She's being dramatic. She's making everything about her. But that's not it. Because here's the thing about being invisible for too long. People only notice you once you're gone. That missed mortgage payment? It won't hurt until the second notice shows up. The busted pipes? Won't be a big deal until January freezes them solid. James's creative projects will keep sputtering to life, but this time, there won't be a safety net beneath him. No sister quietly keeping the lights on from 800 miles away. And I didn't make a big announcement. No public post. No group text. I didn't even tell Aunt Ramona, the only one who still sends birthday cards in actual cursive. I just stopped. I deleted the half-written holiday message I'd been drafting. I unplugged the little Christmas tree I'd set up. The gifts I'd wrapped carefully, thoughtfully, I tucked them into the hall closet, like packing away a version of myself that didn't fit anymore. And no, I didn't cry. There wasn't room for heartbreak. Just clarity. Because love? It shouldn't feel like unpaid labor. And family? That shouldn't come with fine print and fees. I spent decades trying to earn what should have been mine by birthright. But silence isn't love. And being useful isn't the same thing as belonging. Somewhere across town, in a house filled with lights and music and second chances, they laughed without me. And for the first time, I let them. Let them build their joy around the version of me that suited their story, the one where I was too much. Too serious. Too distant. Too cold. The one who never fit their picture-perfect Christmas card. And this time, I didn't show up to prove them wrong. I didn't show up at all. And in doing that, I took something back, something I didn't even know I'd handed over. Christmas morning came soft and gray. The city looked like it had been dusted with powdered sugar. Fog wrapped around the skyline. Snow blanketed rooftops like a memory. I sat by the window wrapped in my favorite blanket, the one that always smells faintly of rosemary and safety. A mug of hot cinnamon apple tea warmed my hands. I didn't turn on the tree. I didn't play the old Christmas playlist I used to use to fill the silence. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just sat there. Still. Whole. Quiet. And finally, enough. The stack of presents I'd wrapped still sat quietly in the corner, bright, cheerful, and, frankly, kind of foolish. They didn't feel like mine anymore. They looked like they belonged to someone who still believed that effort earned you a place at the table. But there was no sadness that morning. No tears. No tightness in my chest. Just a deep, rare stillness. The kind that settles in after a long cry you didn't know you needed. The kind that feels like the air after a storm, washed clean. I hadn't realized how much noise I'd been carrying around inside me. The constant buzzing of obligation. The emotional static of tiptoeing. And then gone. Just gone. Time didn't move normally that day. Noon slipped past like a sigh. No calls. No clattering sounds from my parents' kitchen. No selfies from James and Sarah, hashtagging their way through holiday cheer. No surprise Venmo requests asking for help with unexpected expenses. Just quiet. And for once, I didn't feel the need to interrupt it. Then dusk crept in. The sky turned a deep purple like a bruise spreading slow. That's when my phone buzzed. Once. Then again. A third time. I figured it was a work group chat I forgot to mute. But then a name flashed across the screen. Ramona, can you answer? You've done enough damage already. I just froze. Damage? I hadn't even been there. Then she called. Her name lit up again, and this time I picked up. My voice came out dry and scratchy from not being used all day. What happened? She spoke like someone handling a broken object, gentle and slow. They're saying you ruined Christmas, she said. But Jennifer, you weren't even there. The words hit cold. Ruined it? How do you ruin something you weren't even invited to? She hesitated, then explained in pieces, like pulling shards out of a wound. Apparently, after dinner, Sarah was looking at the family photos on the mantel, just casually, wine in hand. She stopped in front of one. A faded photo from some long-ago birthday. I was maybe 11, maybe 12. Laughing in a sweater 2 sizes too big, sleeves practically swallowing my hands. Sarah tilted her head and asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Wait, is that Dr. Jennifer Monsey? Nancy had nodded. She's the one who stayed up all night with my neighbor last spring, she said. She helped save her life. The room shifted. You could feel it. Laughter died mid-sentence. Forks hung in the air. My mother's smile cracked. James turned white. Then Sarah, wide-eyed, asked, Wait, Jennifer's your sister? The sister you talk about. Nobody answered right away. And whatever someone mumbled next, some awkward dodge or half-truth, was enough. Sarah set down her glass, grabbed her coat, and left. Just like that. Polite. Firm. Like a scalpel sliding clean through flesh. By the time Nancy called me, the damage was already rippling out. Sarah had posted something not dramatic, but sharp. Honest. Just a few lines about how families rewrite history to fit prettier stories. How silence can erase people just as effectively as cruelty. How the most painful damage often happens in well-decorated rooms, surrounded by smiling portraits of people you've carefully learned to pretend don't exist. I didn't need to read the exact words. I could see it all in my mind. The curated image crumbling. The family friends reading between the lines. The quiet panic in art circles, the ones James relied on for his reputation. And for the first time, someone outside the family saw me. Not as a fixer. Not as too much. As a person. A sister. A doctor. A presence. That night, alone in the quiet of my apartment, I realized something more powerful than any argument I could have made. Sometimes, the loudest truth is the silence you leave behind. The very next day, they reached out. An email titled, "Let's Reset Things." It read like a company newsletter, neutral tone, vague wording, no actual substance. It was signed by all three of them, Mom, Dad, and James, as if that collective front could patch over decades of being sidelined. No apology. No accountability. Just vague lines about emotions running high, holiday stress, the importance of family. Then, buried halfway down, came the real ask. Could I please talk to Sarah? Reach out. Smooth it over. Clear the air. Not because they missed me. Not because they finally saw what they'd done. But because James's image was starting to crack, and that, apparently, was unacceptable. It wasn't about me. It had never been about me. It was about the mess I left behind when I stopped holding it all together. They hadn't reached out of love. They reached out because my absence finally had consequences. I didn't reply. That night, snow brushed against my window in soft whispers. My phone lit up again, this time, a different name. Matthew. Hospital administrator. I'd met him once at a fundraiser. Kind eyes. Good grip on a handshake. He sounded hesitant, like he didn't want to be making the call. Jennifer, he said, this might be awkward, but your father reached out. Said he's concerned about your mental state. Thought maybe you need a break from work. My blood ran cold, not the kind that dulls you. The kind that hardens. Sharpens. My father. The man who'd once said I was too intense to keep a husband. Now trying to spin that same trait as instability because I wouldn't fall in line. Not because he believed it, but because he thought it might rattle me. Control masked as concern. Manipulation in the form of help. David didn't buy it. Told me as much. But the message was loud and clear. They weren't trying to reconnect. They were trying to rein me in. And when that failed, the next tactic kicked in, quiet damage control. Group texts, whispers to cousins and extended family. Jennifer's going through something. She's been distant lately. She's overwhelmed. No mention of Christmas. No mention of shutting me out. Just a sanitized version of events that made them look concerned, not complicit. Concern. That's what they called it. But it wasn't care, it was control in a soft sweater. A cousin I hadn't heard from since James's first gallery showing suddenly messaged me. Hey love, if you ever need a yoga retreat, I've got a discount code. It was all so gentle, so curated. Performative kindness with sharp little hooks underneath. I wasn't being looked out for. I was being managed. Every saccharine gesture made one thing clearer. They weren't trying to help me. They were protecting the version of the story that still worked for them. The version where James was the radiant center, the family's creative soul. And I was just the structure that kept things standing. Quiet. Steady. Always helpful. But I was done polishing their myth. Outside, the snow kept falling soft and steady, like it was erasing every step I'd taken to shrink myself for their comfort. And for once, I didn't feel the urge to explain, to argue, or to fix any of it. I didn't need to correct the story, because I knew the truth. And that was enough. But endings like this don't come clean. Not with people who think your silence is part of their inheritance. It happened on a quiet Sunday in mid-January. The kind of cold that settles into your bones and breathes against your windows. I was at my desk, updating patient charts. A mug of forgotten tea sat beside me, long gone cold. Then, a knock. Soft, almost careful. I didn't rush to the door. I paused, listening. To my breath. To my heartbeat. Both calm. I stood, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. There they were. My mother. My father. James. Bundled up. Faces composed. Smiles drawn tight at the edges, like they'd rehearsed for this. I didn't open the door. Not all the way. Just an inch. Enough for the cold to bite my skin. Not enough to invite them in. My mom spoke first, holding her purse like it might contain the perfect thing to say. We just want to talk, she said, her voice gentle, calculated. I didn't reply. I didn't tilt my head or offer a soft landing. Because I saw it clearly. They weren't here for me. They were here for the girl I used to be, the one who'd bend and fold herself into whatever shape they needed. The girl who confused being needed with being loved. That girl was gone. And in her place stood someone who no longer begged for crumbs. The silence between us was loud. Brittle. My father's jaw tightened. James looked like he might float away if he rocked back on his heels any harder. Finally, I spoke. One word. No. No apology. No explanation. No scaffolding made from my own ribs so they could cross the canyon they built. Just no. My mother blinked like she hadn't processed it. Like the very idea of me refusing didn't compute. Like the backbone she'd leaned on had suddenly gone stiff in the wrong direction. I closed the door. Slowly. Without drama. Not a slam. Just a decision. On the other side, their voices rose and fell. First gentle, then sharper, like people trying to sweet-talk a locked gate. I didn't listen. I sat back down, wrapped my hands around the mug of cold tea, and let the silence hold me. It wasn't emptiness. It was sacred. It was mine. The framed letter from Sarah sat on the shelf nearby, ink a little smudged from where she'd pressed her pen too hard. The strokes full of weight. Of intention. I looked at it and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness. Real, honest lightness. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to become the version of a daughter they could finally be proud of. How I'd worn their guilt like a second skin, turned it into fuel to keep showing up. But I was never meant to be a mirror for them, never meant to reflect their pride or soak up their shame. I was meant to be something else. And maybe that, finally, was enough. They didn't leave right away. I heard them shift, whisper, recalculate. Then another knock. Jennifer, please. We just want to talk. But I stayed put. The letter from Sarah steadied me. The tea was cold. Bitter. But in a way, it felt honest. I let them knock. Let them plead. And then, finally, they stopped. That silence? It wasn't hollow. It was whole. That was the moment I understood something I'd spent decades missing. Forgiveness doesn't have to mean opening the door. Sometimes it means knowing when not to. Sometimes it means standing on solid ground while the people who broke you wear themselves out trying to get back in. Not because they've changed, but because they've lost control. And you? You found peace. Eventually, I heard retreating footsteps. Car doors creaked open. The engine hesitated, then started. They left. Not ruined. Not transformed. Just gone. I stood and walked to the window. Pulled the curtain back just enough to see the car's taillights disappear into the snow. I didn't flinch. Didn't text. Didn't feel the need to run after them or pick up the old script. Just peace. Quiet. Grounded peace. The kind that settles into your chest when you finally stop begging for a chair at a table that was never built with you in mind. I turned away. The apartment felt different now. Not brighter. Not louder. Just warmer. Mine. The Christmas tree still stood in the corner, lights off, ornaments untouched. But it didn't feel sad anymore. And the gifts I had wrapped with so much care? They weren't symbols of rejection anymore. They were proof that I had tried. I had shown up. I had loved. I had given without bitterness. They just never saw it. I poured a new cup of tea, stronger this time. Let the steam rise up and kiss my face. I pulled the blanket tight and returned to my desk. The letter caught the light again. You made a difference, Sarah had written. You didn't give up. You made her feel like she mattered. I touched the frame, wooden, solid, slightly worn. Ran my fingers along the glass, cool, smooth, grounding. And for the first time, I felt it. Not pain, not regret. Just this simple, unshakable truth. I am still here, whole, unfolded, and free. Turns out, even when your own family refuses to see you, someone else always does. Not out of duty. Not because they were raised to, but because they're paying attention. I spent years trying to make myself smaller. Quiet enough, agreeable enough, helpful enough. Hoping that if I took up less space, they'd finally let me stay. But I was never meant to live folded in half. Closing the door that day? It wasn't cruelty. It was the clearest I've ever been. They didn't come back because they missed me. They came back because they missed control. Because the version of me they were used to, the one who cleaned up their messes and never asked for thanks. She was gone. In her place stood someone different. Someone who finally understood that real love doesn't come with fine print. It doesn't require silence as payment. It doesn't demand you break yourself in pieces, just to keep someone else feeling whole. So I sat with that, drank my tea, watched the snow fall, soft and slow. And for the first time in a very long time, I realized I didn't need anyone else to rescue me. This time, I had done it myself. The days that followed were calm, uncomplicated. Breathing felt easier. I went back to the hospital, to the real work. The kind that doesn't get you tagged in family albums or talked about at dinner tables. But that matters all the same. Some patients had visitors. Some didn't. But I stayed either way. Because showing up isn't about applause. It's about presence. Then one afternoon, something arrived in the mail. Plain brown paper. No return address. Just my name, handwritten, careful and slanted. Inside, a letter. Thick paper. Neatly folded. A little smudged. It was from Sarah. She told me about her grandmother. About the small, steady rhythms of her life. Yoga on Tuesdays, the market on Saturdays. She remembered the way her grandmother had started slipping into the background of her own story. How people spoke over her, around her. Except for one person. One doctor. The one who stayed after visiting hours. The one who called her by name. The one who looked her in the eye and reminded her that she still mattered. You didn't just help her survive, Sarah wrote. You reminded her she was still here. I read the letter 3 times. Then framed it. Hung it above my desk where the sun could touch it. Not because I needed validation, but because it was proof that I hadn't imagined my worth. I was never invisible. Never too intense. Never too much. I was just in the wrong room. And their failure to see me? That was never my burden to carry. Weeks later, another message came. This one less polished. A little rushed. A little messy. We miss you. We didn't mean to hurt you. Can we talk? But I already knew what was coming. And sure enough, buried toward the end of the message, like a splinter beneath the skin. Can you talk to Sarah? Charles is struggling to find work. The post is causing problems. There it was. Not a reckoning. Not remorse. Just another cleanup job they assumed I'd take on. I didn't reply. Because not everything needs a response. And not every door should be reopened. Some bridges were never bridges at all. Just planks I kept laying down to meet them halfway. That night, as the last light faded, I sat at my desk with another cup of tea, hot this time. The framed letter glowed in the golden wash of the setting sun. And I leaned back, closed my eyes, and breathed easy. Not because someone finally said I mattered, but because I had finally stopped asking for permission to believe it. So, if you're hearing this, and something in it sounds like your own life, if you've ever bent yourself backwards just to be included, if you've been told love has to be earned through sacrifice, let me say this. In the plainest way I know how. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say no. And you are absolutely allowed to build a life where the only people who get close are the ones who show up without expectation, without strings, without trying to shrink you down. The old story? Let it go. Choose peace instead. The quiet kind. The kind you don't have to earn.